Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler, episode 832. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about marketplaces and ancient marketplaces, a republic and a cheeky emperor, really public bathrooms, and skin-eating fish as we go to Athens, Greece. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Let's talk about Athens. This is Chris again, and rather than interrupt the guest, I've got a story to tell you, because a funny thing happened on the way to recording an episode about the Peloponnese in Greece, and that is the episode got so long, more than an hour and a half long, that I've cut it into two pieces. And this is the first piece, which is just about Athens, and then next week we'll talk about the Peloponnese Peninsula. I'd like to welcome to the show Sally Jane Smith, a travel writer who has come to talk to us about a region of Greece. Sally Jane, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It feels quite surreal, actually, to be sitting here after all these years of listening to you on my walk to work.
Well, I appreciate your listening. What region of Greece are we going to talk about today?
So today I'm going to focus on an itinerary that starts in Athens, because that's where most people will enter Greece, and then travels along the eastern half of the Peloponnese and a couple of the Saronic Islands. So this is a collection of sites you can see quite comfortably in about 9 days, traveling by bus, metro, and ferry. Of course, you can stay longer, but with these 9 days, you can have a satisfying experience of what this region of Greece has to offer.
Excellent. And when we say the Peloponnese, we're talking about a peninsula or an island, depending on how one defines it these days, which is the southern third of Greece, starting in Corinth.
Yeah, so if you're looking at a map of Greece, there is a peninsula that sort of looks like a hand that's stretching down towards the Mediterranean. It looks like it's a four-fingered hand, or a thumb and three fingers. And the area I'll be focusing on are the two fingers that are closest to the mainland. So that's Laconia and Argolis.
Excellent. Before we do that, why should someone go to the Peloponnese?
The thing is that most visitors go to Greece. They go to Athens and then they tend to go straight to the islands. And Greece has hundreds of islands. The ones that most visitors go to are the resort-style islands. of Santorini and Mykonos. And don't get me wrong, these are incredible places. Santorini probably has one of the most dramatic seascapes I've seen in my life.
Hmm.
And they're well worth a visit, but they tend to be crowded and they tend to be expensive.
Yes.
And if you're going in the high season, it can feel a bit like you're on a mass market conveyor belt. And it's difficult to get away from that in a place that is so centered on the tourist economy. There
Hmm.
are ways to escape it, but there's always that risk. Whereas if you go to the Peloponnese and the Saronic Islands, which are just off the coast of the Peloponnese, you
Hmm.
get that perfect balance. There are enough travelers visiting the area that they have all the facilities that you might need,
Hmm.
but it also feels like you're exploring the real Greece rather than having a resort holiday. And it's gorgeous. There are striking landscapes, there are incredibly strong connections to history and to legend. I think, yeah, there are 5 World Heritage Sites just on the Peloponnese Peninsula itself.
Excellent. And I forgot to ask you, what is your connection with Greece?
My connection is Greece, that I went to Greece a few years back in the hopes of recapturing my wanderlust that I'd lost in the wake of a travel accident. And Greece completely changed my life. Apart from just infusing me with joy, it turned me into a writer. It's an amazing country, and a lot of people that I talk to talk about how much of an impact a short holiday in Greece made. I know some of your previous podcast guests
Hmm.
have gone to Greece for 3 days and stayed for 35 years. So it is a place
Right.
that has a magic to it.
So there is some danger in going to Greece. We should just tell people up front.
Danger, benefit, I might be biased.
Excellent. And we'll talk more actually. Sally Jane's got a book coming out later that we'll talk about at the end of the show. But what kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us? You said we're starting in Athens.
Yep. Start in Athens. 9 days. I travel solo and I travel by public transport, which is not the
Hmm.
quickest way to travel. And I'm designing this itinerary as if you are dependent on public transport. I love traveling by public transport because I find not only is it cheaper and less stressful than driving and finding my way about, but also because it gives you an opportunity to engage with people who are
Sure.
going about their daily lives. So for me, it's not a waste of time to spend 7 hours sitting in a bus, but I know it's not for everyone. So you could do this itinerary faster if you rented a car. And likewise, you could do it slower if you wanted to spend more time hiking or lazing on the beach.
Okay. And what do you recommend people do while we're in the capital city of Athens?
Athens isn't the focus of the itinerary, but it would be a
Right.
terrible pity if you went to Greece and didn't see Athens, especially if it was your own visit, your first visit. You could happily spend a week there without running out of things to do, but I've given us 2 days in Athens. And I'm not going to detail blow by blow everything that you would see there because you already have 2 episodes that talk about Athens in some depth. That's
Right.
episodes
Hmm.
449 and 96 for those who are looking for them. So I'm going to skip quite quickly over the major sites, but I would like to talk about the practicalities of how to get around and a couple of lesser known gems.
Sure.
So, in terms of how to do it, I'd recommend one of 2 ways. The first is to get about using the metro system. It's great, it's clean, it's cheap, the trains
It
come
goes right all the way
frequently,
to the airport.
all the way to the airport, all the way to Piraeus Port if you're coming in
Hmm.
that way or going out that way. And also, something that I wish I'd known before my first visit because it would have reduced my stress levels is all the metro station signs are in the English alphabet as well as in the Greek alphabet. So it's easy to know
Hmm.
your stop,
Hmm.
easy to find your way around. So that is one way to do it. What I'm going to recommend today is something that I don't usually recommend.
Okay.
It's not usually my preference, but given that you've got 2 days in Athens and there are a couple of particular things I want you to do and see,
Hmm.
I'm going to suggest that you get a hop on, hop off bus ticket.
Okay.
So the hop on, hop off bus tickets are, if you're not familiar with the concept, they generally a fleet of coaches. They
Hmm.
travel around set sites in the city in sequence. So there's sort of one bus that comes along every 20 minutes or so, and they go around all the major tourist sites, the major shopping districts, the major transport hubs. So they're a very convenient way of getting around the city, not
Hmm.
necessarily the best way of engaging or exploring yourself, but they do serve a purpose. So this company that I went with, there are a few. The company I went with is a company called City Sightseeing, and the
Okay.
ticket costs about €30 for a 2-day ticket that covers 3 routes around and outside the city.
Okay.
So you'd probably start with the Athens Loop. Now, if you just wanted to sit on the bus and listen to the tourist commentary, that would take you about 90 minutes. So you can get off, as I say, wherever you like. But many of the sites, that's fine. That's all you need to see. So, for example, you'll see the Panathenaic Stadium. That's a massive white marble stadium that was built 2,500 years ago and was restored for the first International Olympics. For me, it was fine for me to see that from the upper deck of an open top bus. That was cool.
Okay.
But where the real benefit comes in is that there are extras that go with these bus tickets. And a lot of people don't know or don't care about these extras. And the best extra is the free walking tours that you can get with these tickets.
Okay.
They have tours that specialize in various parts of the city, tours that specialize in photography opportunities,
Hmm.
and these are completely free, although the guides do appreciate a tip. So if you can afford a tip, I think it's a good thing to do.
Sure.
The tours will not take you into the fee-paying sites. They're free tours, so they don't include tickets anywhere.
Okay. So
But
we're
they
not
will
going to take this up to the Acropolis or someplace like that. Some of the best known sites.
Exactly. But the
Hmm.
tour will take you around the Acropolis, and it
Okay.
will point up to the Acropolis and tell you what you'll see if you then choose to buy a ticket to go up there. It will also take you, depending on which tour you do, to the side of the hill of the Acropolis that overlooks the ancient Agora, for example. And the
Right.
tour guide might point out to you the various monuments and sites and give you the stories and the links and the context that if you then choose to go yourself, it will mean so much more for you than just seeing a pile of stone ruins without context.
So you're saying it goes to Mars Hill? Do I have the right place?
I'm not sure. Oh, Mars Hill. Yes, it actually did go to Mars Hill. It went to this tour that I went to Mars Hill. It went to the Pnyx. It went to, a dozen sites that
Okay.
some of which I'll talk about when I talk about what you can do, whether you're on the tour or by yourself, which I guess
Hmm.
is now's a good time to get into that. So I've only chosen a couple of sites in Athens because I want to spend most of the time talking about the Peloponnese.
Right.
But if you are in the area around the Acropolis, which is where you probably will be, if you go to the side of the hill of the Acropolis where the main entrance up to the Acropolis and the ticket offices and so on are, that's where all the buses pull in. There's 16,000 visitors a day, I believe, that visit the Acropolis.
Hmm.
It's tourism central. But if you turn your back on the crowds and you walk just, 3, 4 minutes west, you'll find a little church. And that church is called the Church of Saint Dimitri Lombardiaris. And I'm going to apologize now to all your Greek listeners because I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce words throughout the episode. I can try and blame some of it on my Aussie accent, but
That always works. That always works.
so this little church has a very quirky legend or history attached to it. It's sometimes locked, sometimes you can get in. I've seen it both ways. But the interest of the site is in its name, Saint Dimitri Lombardiaris. If you do manage to get inside, you will find the main icon of the church. It's quite impressive. It's got a saint on the back of a large red horse, and he's floating in the air, and he's huge. He's larger than life. And he's pointing a long spear or lance down towards the Parthenon. And if you look really carefully, you will see that the spear is actually pointed to a very small cannon in front of the Parthenon. And the
Hmm.
legend of this church is that The Turks at that stage, when it was under Ottoman occupation and the Turks were using the Parthenon as a stronghold,
Mm-hmm.
they were bombarding the church. They were trying to shoot the church with cannon. And just as Yusuf, the Turkish commander, was giving the order for another volley of shots, a miraculous bolt of lightning came out of the heavens and struck Yusuf down dead in that moment and saved the church. And I'm not sure if the name Lombardiaris means bombardier, but that's what it sounds like. So
Saint
I always think
Demetrius the
about it as
Bombardier. Yep.
Saint Dimitri the Bombardier. Although, as I say, not sure if that is the literal meaning.
I'm
So
looking
that
at a
church.
translation. So yes,
Oh,
it
you
is.
are?
Yeah.
Great. So there's that little church. If you then walk a few minutes further, another 4 or 5 minutes further, you'll get to a stretch of grassy parkland called the
Mm-hmm.
Pnyx. That's spelt Pnyx. And the Pnyx is a site that will probably be deserted when you get there, even though if you turn around and look back, the hill of the Acropolis will be literally crawling with tourists. You'll be 5 minutes away and you'll be in this almost empty grassy parkland, and this is the site of the birth of democracy. Even if it's not quite democracy as we know it today, I think there's people tend to gloss over that in fact there were a lot of deeply oppressed people in an ancient Athenian society.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the site of the first democratic assemblies of ancient Greece. And we're talking going back in the 5th century BCE. Now, in the original time, when the Pnyx started serving this function, it was pretty much as you're seeing it now. It was open parkland. It was a field. There weren't any fancy buildings there. It was a field where the citizens of Athens gathered to discuss the issues of the day. And if you go there, you will see there is a stone platform at one edge of it called the bema. And the bema is where, I guess, the equivalent of the speaker of the assembly sat and led the proceedings. But what is remarkable about this parkland is you can walk around the field. If there's more than one of you, one of you can stay at the bema, at the orator's platform, and the other person can go to various places in the field and talk in practically normal tones, and their companion at the bema will be able to hear what they're saying. So we actually tested these acoustics out when I was there, and it really brought home how one person standing at the back of a crowd could have made his voice heard in this democracy. And it would have been a he, because there would have been no women allowed. As I said, Athens was actually, its treatment of women at that time was on par with what we consider the most oppressive regimes today, which is something that gets forgotten, I think. But it still is a remarkable moment to stand there and realize that you're in the presence of this moment in history that is not marked by any massive monuments. It's just a field.
I have completely missed it, and I've been at the Acropolis Museum, which is 5 blocks away or something like that, and had just no idea that it was there.
The Acropolis Museum, I won't talk about the Acropolis Museum except to say it is wonderful. It's wonderful, but again, don't want to waste too much time.
You should go to the museum.
You should go to the Acropolis and you should go to the museum.
Exactly.
And you should definitely go to the top story of the museum where you can see the Parthenon marbles, or what's left of them, particularly because all the gaps in the Parthenon marbles that have been looted by other countries, most notably by Elgin, are filled by replicas, and the difference in color between the very white plaster replicas and the originals, it just brings that message home very strongly about what's been taken. But I said I was not going to talk about the Acropolis Museum, so I won't get down that particular pathway. I would suggest now going to the other side of the hill of the Acropolis. So we started on the side where the main entry is, and you can actually walk around the hill of the Acropolis to the side that is opposite from the Acropolis Museum. And you can walk down a beautiful district called Plaka, which takes you down to Monastiraki Square.
Konnichiwa, I'm Yuki, a tour leader with Explore. Who knew that hidden among Tokyo's towering skyscrapers was a peaceful tea house surrounded by ancient trees and serene ponds. Actually, I knew it was my mother's secret sanctuary. Not everyone knows about Tokyo's Hamarikyu Gardens. Arigatou gozaimasu. But you will if you explore. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel, explore.
These are violent criminals, so they're not going to go down easy.
ABC Tuesdays.
Let's get this done.
The Rookie is back.
We have 2 new rookies starting today.
Howdy.
Being a cop is stressful 24/7. Every year on the job is different.
And Training Day
We have a serial killer at large.
never ends.
We need an ambulance!
The Rookie. All new Tuesdays on ABC and stream on Hulu.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
Now, on that path between Plaka and Monastiraki Square, you will come across what is known as the Roman Agora. Now, Agora means marketplace, and there are 2 main Agora sites that you will see in Athens, the Roman Agora and the ancient Agora, which was the Greek Agora.
Right.
Now, the Roman Agora, you can pay to go inside, but you can also stand above it. It's open air. You can see pretty much most of what you can see if you go inside from that viewpoint. The most striking feature in the Roman Agora is the Tower of the Winds, which I know was discussed in one of your previous episodes,
Right.
which is
Sure.
a beautiful structure and which was used as both a clock and a weather station in the past. And I'm talking about the distant past, so this was
Right.
quite impressive technology for the time. Right next to or behind the Tower of the Winds, depending on where you're standing, is an interesting feature that'll probably be old news to people who've visited other Roman settlements around the world. But if it's your first time seeing it, it's a bit of an eye-opener. And those are the very public bathrooms of yesteryear.
Okay.
So you can see a square of stone benches with 68 holes in them. And these are 68 latrines set in a very companionable square, close together. There would have been no divisions between these latrines at all. And they had to be close together so you could pass around the communal sponge on a stick that you would use to clean yourself after you've done what you need
That
to do.
doesn't make it better, though.
Yes, so this is something that you can see often in Roman settlements, but yeah, it's noteworthy, I think. If you walk just 2 minutes, okay, I've now lost my bearings and I can't think east or west. I want to say east. I hope I haven't got it wrong. If you just walk 2 minutes away from the Roman Agora and the Tower of the Winds, you will come to a small museum called the Bathhouse of the Winds.
Okay.
And this is a small museum which is in a historic Ottoman hammam, which is the
Okay.
communal bathhouse of the past. Now, one of the draw cards to this bathhouse is that there'll be hardly anyone. Certainly, I've been there twice, and both times I've been there. One time, I think I was the only person there, and the other time there was one other couple who was visiting. So if you've had your fill of tourists and noise, it's an unfortunate thing about being a tourist that you also have to accept that you're with other tourists, and it can be a bit of a stimulation overload. So this is it's air conditioned, you're out of the heat of Athens, it's quiet, and it's a very interesting glimpse into a side of historic life that we perhaps don't see that much of when we travel. And it's a side of life that was both private in the terms of it was a place where people went to wash because they didn't have running water in their homes, but was also a communal place. And I think particularly for women, I find it very interesting being in the space where women would have been together and relatively free compared to their lives outside of the bathhouse. It's I'm not sure if I remembered, it costs €2 to enter, so it's not expensive. There is a free downloadable app. You can scan in a QR code. It has a very good audio commentary. The exhibition panels are very well done. It's well worth a visit.
Okay.
Then if you head down into Monastiraki Square, which is only a few minutes away, that's a good place to stop and have some lunch. There are a bunch of souvlaki restaurants there where for a couple of euros you can get a souvlaki. They're different souvlaki joints that specialize in lamb souvlakis or pork or chicken. You can get a beer. It's a cheap lunch, very filling and delicious. So that's a good place to do that. There's also a flea market and a lot of souvenir shops in that area. So if shopping is your thing, that is one place that you can pick things up. And when you are rejuvenated, if you haven't had too many beers, you can then walk another 5 minutes or so in the other direction, and that will take you to the ancient agora.
Right.
Now, the ancient agora, I said the word agora means marketplace, and literally that's what it means. But the ancient agora was much more than a little market stall. It was a commercial center of antiquity. So that area, yes, it has the market shopping district of the past, but it also has the remains of streets and libraries. There's an aqueduct, there's a water clock, there are the prison cells, there's a striking temple called the Temple of Hephaestus. There's also a stoa. So there's heaps to see there. It's well signposted. There's a little corner that a lot of people miss right on the outskirts of the agora, and that's where you can find a tiny little church that dates back to the 10th century. It's the Church of the Holy Apostles, and that was built back in the 10th century to commemorate St. Paul's sermons. So he was in Athens preaching in this agora, as well as in various other sites around Athens and around Greece in the 1st century. And this church was built. It's not in great condition. It's not very spectacular. You can see some frescoes.
The frescoes is what I remember from my visit.
Yeah. So it's a special little place to visit, and a lot of people miss it. But by the time you've visited all these places, as well as all the other big ticket items that I'm not covering on purpose, the day will have gone by and it'll be time for dinner. So you will have seen hundreds of restaurants and cafes as you've walked about, and of course you can just go into any one that takes your fancy. My recommendation, both for Athens and anywhere else you travel, if it's possible, it's not always possible, is to find a restaurant that's full of people, but not full of
Locals.
tourists.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you can find a restaurant that's full of Greek patrons or almost full with Greek patrons, you're onto a good thing. My favorite place to eat in Athens is a little bar called Kalamaki Bar. It's about 3 blocks away from the Acropolis, so it's just on the outskirts of that real touristy area. It's very close to the Sigru Fix metro station. And their speciality is meat skewers.
Okay.
So you actually build up your plate. So you can pay per skewer. So you can choose whether you want chicken or beef or pork or lamb skewers. You can choose how many. They cost €2 or €3 per skewer.
Okay.
And you can then build it up with sides ranging from 50 cents for some pita bread through €3 or €4 for different varieties of fries, up to specialty salads that might go up to about €8. They sometimes do a spinach, fig, and walnut salad that is magnificent. Pair that with a couple of skewers and a glass of white wine. That's krasi, by the way. That was one of the first Greek words I learned.
Okay.
You have a meal fit for royalty.
Very good.
If you're me, you'd go to bed then. There is a lot of nightlife. I won't go into it. It's not my specialty. But if jet lag is working in the opposite direction from the way it does to me, and you're up all night, there's plenty to do. There's even, if you're not into dancing under strobe lights, if that's even what they do anymore in nightclubs. I haven't been for a
You're
while.
asking the wrong one, so
Something that Athens is well known for is its escape rooms. They've won a lot of awards. There are a lot of great escape rooms in Athens, and they're open till late. So there's one I've been looking at called Paradox Project, which is more for advanced escape room users. They're long form rooms. They open till 3:00 in the morning. And I've checked with them. They're suitable for English speakers, and they say a lot of the other escape rooms as well. You just want to check first before you go. You can go in even if you don't speak any Greek. So that's something a little different to do if you're up all night.
All right, then.
Okay, so day 2. This is the second reason I recommended the hop-on, hop-off bus. Day 2, I recommend you spend the morning. It's probably hot. You're probably tired from the big night of playing escape rooms. I recommend you jump on one of the hop-on, hop-off buses and go down on their beaches route.
Okay.
So a good place to get onto the bus is just across the road from the Temple of Olympian Zeus. So you can have a quick look through the fence, see the temple. And also directly across from that bus stop, there is a monumental archway that was built by the Emperor Hadrian. Now, there's a man who liked to mark his territory with a building project. Most people, if they've heard of Hadrian, will know of Hadrian's Wall in northern England. But this arch, when he came in and he finished up building the Temple of Olympian Zeus, making sure that it was the biggest temple in Greece at that time, he built this arch and he referenced Theseus, who is a legendary hero king of ancient Greece, probably best known for slaying the Minotaur on Crete. And Hadrian, who likes to be the biggest man around town, he built this arch, and on the one side of the arch he had inscribed, "This is Athens, the ancient city of Theseus." On the other side of the arch he had inscribed, "This is the city of Hadrian and not of Theseus." And that, of course, was the side facing the temple, which was one of his masterworks. So you'll jump in the bus, and the bus will take you on the highway down the coast. Listen out for the commentary. There's going to be a very brief mention of a church that you can see on your left-hand side as you go down the highway, called the Church of Agios, or Christ the Savior. And we're going to try and visit it on the way back. So maybe just have a look, get an idea of where it is as you go past.
Okay.
For now, I'm going to take you to the very end of the line to Lake Vouliagmeni. And when I put this itinerary together, Chris, I had forgotten that you've actually been to Lake Vouliagmeni.
I have been. A very singularly unusual experience.
So this lake, the name means sunken. And the reason for the name is that this was long ago, eons ago, this lake was underground. But at some point in the distant past, the roof of the cavern collapsed and exposed a large part of the lake to open air. And this is, I guess you'd call it a local tourism spot. When I was there, I was surrounded by people speaking Greek. So you're experiencing leisure like a local. It's set up beautifully. It has wooden terraces all around it with sunbeds and tables. There are they're waiters walking around carrying cocktail menus. But the draw card for this lake is not only that the water is supposed to be mineral rich and have all sorts of health benefits, but it also is filled with millions, I would say, of teeny tiny little fish that nibble away at any dead skin you might have on your fingers and toes while you're swimming.
Yes, indeed they do.
It's a very strange sensation, this tickling sensation. It's worth a visit.
And I will say two things about it.
Yeah.
My skin on my feet has never looked better. And oh my gosh, that tickles. So I would sit there and I would let them do that for some small period of time. And then I would just Kind of
I did
shake
the
off all the
same.
fish. Yeah.
There was a lot of shaking of fish and then swimming vigorously for a minute and then pausing, and they'd all come flocking back. And you can look
Exactly.
down through the water and see them nibbling at your fingers. It's very unusual. It's also just a lovely place just to sit, even if you're not swimming.
It is.
It is a ticketed entry. Tickets
Mhm.
start at about €15 and go all the way up to about €45, depending on how exclusive you want your seating area to be. If you did go on the hop-on, hop-off bus, when I went, there was a discount voucher that was attached to the map or on the printed map. So
Okay.
there is an option to get a discount. And if you're not into the tickling fish, because it won't be everybody's cup of tea, there is a beach just across the road, Vuliagmeni Beach. And there
Mhm.
also are a number of other beaches that you can get off on that bus route. There is Asteria Beach and Glyfada Beach and a few others. So I would stay there a couple of hours, have a bit of a swim, a bit of a tickle, and then get back on the bus and head back towards the church that I drew your attention to on your way here. So this church of Aios Sostis is a remarkably pretty church. It's all pink brick and turquoise tiles. It's got an octagonal domed roof topped with terracotta. Inside, you can see it's actually supported by a wrought iron framework, which is unusual. The framework is clearly very strong, but it's very beautifully wrought into a kind of pattern of foliage. And they're going to be gilded chandeliers and people kissing icons. You'll probably be the only foreigner there, which is just worth noticing if you go into churches in Greece or any other religious places in Greece, synagogues or mosques. It's best to keep your shoulders and your knees covered, and that goes for both men and women. So
Sure.
I generally just keep a shawl or a sarong in my bag, and I can pull it out if I need to. Now, again, the interest in this church, yes, it's pretty, but it has an interesting history. So the reason it was mentioned on the bus commentary is because it was the location of a failed assassination attempt on Greece's King George back in 1898. But there is far more history to it than this. So I imagined that the king was praying at church and people burst in and tried to stab him. But that was not what happened at all. In fact, there wasn't a church there at that time. The king and his daughter were in a carriage coming back from a trip to the beach, just like you have, when they were ambushed by two men. And the king survived. And in thanksgiving for the king's escape, the local municipality decided to erect a church. And what they did, instead of building a church from scratch, this building that you see actually started its life as the Greek pavilion at a magnificent World's Fair that took place in Paris in 1900, which was also the site of the first modern Olympic Games outside of Greece. And when the Paris Exposition of 1900 closed, they dismantled the pavilion and they shipped it back to Athens and re-erected it on the site where the king survived the assassination attempt. So when you've seen the church, you can cross the highway. Don't try and cross the highway above ground. It is a death trap. There is an underground pedestrian underpass just a short way from the church. And then you can get into another of these hop-on buses. Be careful not to get on the same one you were on before. You don't want to go back to Lake Vugliameni. The third route takes you to Piraeus, which is the ancient harbour and seaport port which has served Athens for 25 centuries. There are places you can get off, but I was quite happy just to enjoy the 90-minute trip around. If you would like a good seafood lunch, this is the place you could get off at one of the hop-off stops called Mikro Limano, which means little harbour. And there are some well-known seafood restaurants in that harbour where you can grab a good lunch.
All right.
I'm probably going to stop talking about Athens now. I do have various other places in Athens to talk about, lots of places to shop, other sites to see, but I've already used a fair amount of time and I want to get onto the Peloponnese.
Okay.
Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks. the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. The app is simple. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the PrizePicks Daily Fantasy Sports app today and use code FIELD and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code FIELD on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
That's where we're going to end this show, and then we'll pick up this story, the longer portion of this story, next week as we talk about the Peloponnese. At this point, I want to thank the patrons of the show who help support the show financially. If you're interested in becoming a patron of the show or just learning more, you can go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. We have started voting on where the Amateur Traveler Tour will be this year. If you're interested, go to amateurtraveler.com/trips, which is a private Facebook group, to have your say. I think it would be an understatement to say that I had a little bit of mixed feedback on last week's show on Calabria. I heard from Colin, who's one of the patrons of the show, who said, loving the Calabria episode, instantly jumping up on our to-do list. And then I had someone else who wrote and thought it was the worst episode ever. And the only reason I wanted to bring that up is they said it had long gaps in it. And that one we have to blame on me. As I've been editing this show, I've been using a program that can take out some of the things like I'm doing right now, the places where we don't quite finish our thought or we say or ah, some of that places where we're editing out things that don't add anything to the show. And there are, I'd say on average, about 800 different places in a given show that are edited out. And I used to just clip those, and I found that it was just a little too ragged. It was a little too clipped for me, and so I left some of the space in, but it sounds like I left in too much space for at least one listener's taste. And that's certainly possible because I edit the show at about 1.7 speed, so it probably sounded... So there were probably shorter spaces for me than there were for the listener. I apologize if my editing got in the way of enjoying that episode. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more.